I'll open this meeting up. It's 4 o'clock.
Second,
All
all in favor?
Aye.
right, so the first thing on the agenda is the 508 CJC Highway. Oh, kind of filled in. So Chris, whoever wants to jump in to give the kind of brief overview. And I apologize, I missed the last meeting due to work conflicts.
Well, no problem. You know, I sent information out to both of you that I had an in-depth discussion with the Concom agent. And she noted that on the WPA Form 3 NOI, that they incorrectly answered question 5, saying that it was not designated as an outstanding resource water. And that particular building on the property is in that area. So, you know, this is where my concern lies, because it is the water supply in the resource area. And according to everything that I've looked at, they were supposed to have only 2 lifts on that property according to their applications. And they've been dealing with up to 4. And after what Mr. Henderson told us at our last meeting, that there were no fluids in the building and everything was going to be removed, nothing's been done, because we've heard that same story before. But as I said, I'm most concerned about them being in the resource water area.
Chris, what was your kind of takeaway from Mr. Henderson?
He doesn't have a full grasp on what is happening on site. So he's trying to speak to and answer questions for things I don't think he fully knows or understands. What he presented to us is additional measures that Peter is willing to make for us to support the change of use classification of that smaller building. So we have not agreed to support that change of use yet, but the facts are he is in violation of a cease and desist. He's in a violation of the approved use of that building, and he is allowing conditions that are potentially detrimental to our water source. So from our perspective, we are trying to do all that we can to protect our water source, but that doesn't do anything to impact the lack of enforcement on the part of the town or the authorities having jurisdiction. And we are the only ones, it would appear, that are trying to influence or change what is happening on that site. So without the support or cooperation of the town and the authorities having jurisdiction, we're the only one fighting here. He should not be conducting any type of auto repairs or diagnostics at all in that building, according to his permit. He's in violation of the cease and desist from the building inspector. So we are not going to be able to enforce any of those things. We can just do what we're doing to influence the outcome. So we have to use the advantages we may have or the options that are in front of us to influence the outcome. If we do not support the change of use, then the ZBA is likely to not grant a change of use. So if that scenario happens and there's no enforcement, or there continues to be no enforcement, then nothing changes. If the change of use is granted, Peter has agreed to put a permanent restrictive covenant on that building and install additional protective measures to protect the water supply or the water source. So I consider those as positive steps in the right direction. With the backdrop of that property and those buildings being in the best condition they've been in from an environmental standpoint since 1930. If there had been a precedent or any type of past enforcement, I may feel differently, but I have a fairly low level of confidence that enforcement will increase or start from this point forward. I mean, that cease and desist was sent 9 months ago. The building is clearly being used as an auto repair garage, and we seem to be the only ones that are discussing it. So again, if you look at it from the standpoint of the additional protective measures or the additional measures they're proposing with the backdrop of this facility being in a better environmental condition, when you look at that as opposed to the fact that if we do nothing and we do not support it and these measures do not get implemented, there will likely be no change of behaviors or conditions.
Okay, now, talking about the lack of support and inspection in the town, we have seen this throughout so many different projects. And I think it's important that we at least have something on record in to the ZBA to indicate where our position is, that our main concern is protecting the public drinking water supply because it is right there in the protected area as designated by Mass DEP. And if something happens, now I don't know who's going to be at fault, but at least we have done all we can to inform them of where we stand and these activities that should not have been happening. He has been, as you said, not living by the conditions that were placed upon him. He agreed when he was building this site that there were only going to be 2 lifts on the site. And he has 1 lift already where the main building is. And then he's been operating 2 to 3 other ones on the other building. It's, not our fault that no one has done any enforcement. We have been proactive for 2.5 years trying to get something done. And, take a look. We just had that high PFAS come back. The test, test before last. And I don't know what else we could do. What he is talking about is putting in 2 bushes in a swale. I don't know if that's going to really protect our water supply. But
I have a question. So if we enact this to say, because I lean both ways, so if I lean on to Chris's way and we're kind of like the enforcing agent of the water supply, can we say we go in for an inspection and we do find issues, can we impose like a fine for the first offense? I mean, is that something we're allowed to do? Is that?
So Brian suggested that there be in the restrictive covenant on, and again, just to state, I mean, it's not like my point of view or my way. I'm just looking at the facts and trying to come to a resolution, because as it currently stands, it's not a good situation. And if we have the ability to influence a better outcome, then we should seize that opportunity. Because if we do nothing, this continues for years and years and years. There's going to be continual lack of enforcement, in my opinion. So if we have an opportunity to set the conditions, put in additional protective measures, then we should seize that opportunity. And just because these were their two proposals doesn't mean it's all we can ask for. But at the last meeting, it was suggested that in the restrictive covenant, we reserve the right to have a town official do unannounced inspections of the facility. And if there's a violation, according to Rich Henderson, if there's a violation of that restrictive covenant, there can be fines or penalties and other things. So I don't know the particulars on that. We would need to flush that out. But certainly, if he's in violation of the restrictive covenant, then there would be consequences. There would be repercussions.
The water department would be the enforcer of those restrictive covenants.
No,
No.
I don't think so, because one thing you have to keep in mind also is because of the paperwork that was signed on this property, he is supposed to be getting twice a year inspections in perpetuity already. And, you know, if he's not getting it now, and if we put it in, he's not going to get it then, you know, what do we do?
So like,
But I mean, I think we just have to have something, no matter what, on record saying, this is where we are, this is what we feel is important, that we are looking to protect the water supply because he has not done everything as he was supposed to have, according to all of his applications. We are
So-
concerned.
So, and I agree with that, Lee. We can document our concerns and put them in writing. What would be our counter or additional requests? Because if we're trying to bring this to a resolution and take further measures to protect the water supply, we have to have a counter or further requests that they put in place. If we don't, this is likely to just continue to be kicked down the road. So,
Well,
if-
no, it's not going to be kicked down the road. This is it. This is the end of the line. They're making decisions because he has been kicking this down the road for 9 months. He's put it off by continuances for 9 months, continuing doing his operation the way he has been. So they have to come to a decision now.
so
Even what we
Wait a-
said, what could we say? Well, I don't know whether or not that swale and the 2 bushes are really going to do anything for us. And they have these things in place and we have our hands tied because we don't have the enforcement. The enforcement people haven't been doing their job.
and yeah, I mean that
But
is
all we
that-
could do is say, they wanted to hear from us, so they'll be hearing from us. And if that instigates anything on their part to change anything, fine. And another thing, I did run into Mr. Chittick, and Mr. Chittick said, oh, it's the building inspector who's going to make the decision. And then, the building inspector says, no, it's the ZBA. So I don't know.
All right, so hypothetically, if the ZBA does not grant a change of use for the smaller building, from your experience and opinion, what happens then?
Then he has to take the lifts out of the building and just use it for storage as he applied. That's all.
I mean,
That means they can't-
in reality, though, he shouldn't have even put them in there in the first place. It was never
gotta
enforced. It
defer-
was never,
You know,
never
it was-
inspected. It was never inspected. It was never enforced. He used the building for an auto repair garage for a number of years.
Mhm.
And it was in violation the entire time. It was never enforced. So if that building remains a storage barn or storage garage as it's permitted to be, and he continues to service vehicles in there, keep petroleum products and fluids, then what?
Call DEP. I hate to say this. I mentioned this to my daughter who used to work in water and wastewater, and she said, call the big guns in. That's our last resort. If he defies what ZBA says, if ZBA says no, you have to go by your original plan. Or you can only have one lift in there because you have a lift in the other building.
Do you think it makes sense to reserve that option after these additional protective measures are put in place? Where there's a there's a permanent restrictive covenant on the use of that building, which applies to him and any future owners of the property. There's additional water quality swale installed around the building. And then if there's further violation of the permitted use of that building, then DEP is called.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the last resort if the town isn't doing their job.
I think the enforcement should be the water department itself. You know, I wouldn't leave it up to, you know, the building inspector. I think it should be us that does it.
It's not
Well,
our
no,
jurisdiction. It's not our jurisdiction.
No,
We-
it's-
We're not an authority over that.
So it's-
Conservation is the enforcing agent. Conservation has been the enforcing agent on Elms Meadow because they're not supposed to be permitting the dumping, and they've been permitting it. We do not have that. It's not under our bylaws. You take a look under the town bylaws and they are the enforcing agents.
So
You
we,
know, this is where we are.
so
You
if,
know, the only thing we could do is go above their heads and go to the state.
so if we lean towards, say, if we lean towards the, you know, the inspection route, you know, unannounced, we would have to have the schedule with, oh, you know, the present and future water commission, water department would have the schedule with the conservation agent to enforce.
Well, no, well, because that is their job. They're supposed to be doing this now.
Well,
I don't know if it would be the conservation commission or if it would be the building inspector.
right,
I don't know.
we're gonna,
I think it
Well,
would be the.
It
would
came
be-
under the NOI that he applied for conservation. That's where the inspection in perpetuity came. So I don't know who would do it. You know, and it depends upon who we have working in town, how they feel. Because take a look at us. We have absolutely no control over any of the town employees.
you know, in a covenant, can we add, you know, Chris, or can we ask for 2 water sampling tests per year? I mean, how much did that test cost us last time wasn't that like about $1,000?
Something like that. Well, we're supposed to be doing testing ourselves twice a year.
I mean, I
Over-
think you're on the right track. I mean, I think now's our opportunity to ask for whatever we want.
Yeah,
That's-
And if we want to say we need to test twice a year and you have to pay for it, I mean, now's the opportunity to request those things. And again, I mean, now is the opportunity for us to put measures in place that we want in place. I think it would not be wise for us to lose the opportunity to get him to do more.
well, unfortunately, we have to get this out really quickly because they need it for their meeting next week.
So let's quickly talk about if we decide to go the route of, you know, reporting with you know, with inspections. I think, you know, for instance, I would like to see like a 5-way pay for those testings twice a year for us.
All right, so I mean, the inspections are already there under Concom that he's supposed to be that site is supposed to be inspected twice a year in perpetuity. If we can add that we want to have the site also tested twice a year for any type of pollutants.
Petroleum.
Now, I don't think we should just say petrochemicals because now we also have the state and the federal government coming down with different PFAS requirements. And petroleum products fall under PFAS. So I think we should use the term PFAS rather than just petroleum products, or we could say petroleum products and PFAS.
Brenda, how much was that last PFAS test? Was it about 1,500? It's about, I think it was like $1,200 for the test. For some reason that number.
PFAS test?
What?
PFAS test?
I'll tell you in about 2
Yeah,
seconds.
it's over $1,000.
So they, they should be responsible for testing twice a year.
They should be responsible for paying.
Thank-
We would
Yes.
administer the test.
Yeah, it's 1,400.
See? So 3,000 a year.
Yeah, but if we say PFAS and petroleum products, it's more than that. It's probably about 4,000 a year.
So we could ask for both.
I think we should. I mean, because this is, don't forget, we are going into a more restrictive position here from the government with all water supplies across the country.
Yep. No, I agree. So I know it's not a motion, but we all agree at least add the testing in twice a year for PFAS and petroleum, correct?
I guess.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
If you guys collectively write something up cohesive, I mean, they're meeting what, on the 17th,
15.
on the 15th?
Mhm.
Throw it on letterhead and just get it over to the ZBA beforehand.
We have to.
Well, why wouldn't we go to Rich and tell him these are our additional requests?
Well,
No,
Leah said
but-
she wanted something in writing, so that's why. I
Yeah, we
said-
have to have something in writing, and ZBA wants something in writing from us.
Well, I know, but we don't, under its current proposal, we do not support it as a board. So if we go back to Mr. Anderson and say, in addition to the restricted covenant and the additional water quality swell around the property, we are requiring that Quest Imports pay for testing, water quality testing 2 times per year, including petroleum and PFAS. And unannounced inspections by the jurisdiction having authority up to 4 times per year. Right. So if we say those to Rich and say these are our additional sort of demands, they can determine if they're going to go along with that. And
All
if
right,
they do, we could then determine if we support that. Does that make any sense?
What we can do, I think, because we're running out of time, is put this in a letter to ZBA saying they have come to us and want to put in permanent restrictive covenant. And we are very concerned about this situation because it falls in, mention the WPA Form 3, outstanding resource water. And in order to protect the water supply, we feel it is important for them to be required to do this testing twice a year and to make sure that we have inspections of that property 4 times a year. Just so they know that we are actively looking at this. I don't think Rich, because Rich going back and forth with Mr. Henderson, it's, okay, we're gonna do this, and then it doesn't quite get done. Just say, this is what they propose, but we feel comfortable if they will do this. And ZBA, they'll be before ZBA and they can answer ZBA. So it won't be well, it came through Mr. Henderson and this is what they said. They'll be directly at the ZBA meeting and they can talk to them face to face. And even one of us can go to the ZBA meeting if we want to. Then that way, it's out there, it's in public, everybody knows about it. And there won't be any question where we stand. It's not that we're trying to shut down the property or anything. We're not trying to do that. If they were just doing what they applied for, they wouldn't be in this position. But since they have overextended what they did, and also within that one area, this is where the problem lies. So Chris, you want to put out a draft? We could look at it, and then we could send it over to ZBA.
Sure, I will do that. If you're asking me to do that.
Who wants to, is there, do you want to make a motion? Do we have to make it a motion?
Sure, I make a motion that Chris lays out a draft for the ZBA meeting for next week to include our discussions with Mr. Henderson of what the proposed applicant is going to do to enhance the water quality.
Going too
And-
fast.
Okay.
DBA to include discussion with Rich Henderson, what the proposed, okay, now go.
Okay, what the proposed additional what do we say? The additional environmental swales,
Environmental protection measures.
yeah, the environmental protection measure, including the planting of an additional bush and a swale to protect the water supply.
Including water quality testing.
And we would also one have included, in addition to his permanent restricted covenant that he proposed, water quality testing
For PFAS and petroleum.
Wait a second, we have to wait for Brenda.
The board would also include in his permanent covenant testing
The
of
permanent restricted covenant,
hold on. Covenant testing of PFAS and petroleum
products
products.
twice a year, which is in addition to the biannual inspections by town departments
We
or by appropriate town departments.
should also note in that motion, paid for by the owner of 508. We should name
Or
the property.
by the owner of 508 2JC Highway.
We just named the address.
Yeah, that way it doesn't have to be a name.
Yeah. I mean, then this way, we have ourselves covered, that we are looking out for the water supply, which is our covenant. And we won't be taken by surprise if something comes down. I don't know, how do you feel, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's the right outline of what we just discussed. But if this is a letter that's sent to the ZBA, what are we saying? We're saying we don't support a change of use until these conditions are met. So
Right.
then this,
In order to support,
then the ZBA will be presenting Rich with those new items for consideration. And he won't be able to agree to any of it because he won't be with Peter and they will have just heard of
no,
these
well, we
things for the
can,
first time.
no, we can send a copy to Rich.
Okay, and if
So
I
that he,
understood, if I understood it correctly, this is the last time the ZBA is gonna hear this, correct?
that's correct, because they said they are not going to give him another continuance. He started continuances almost a year ago, 11 months ago.
Okay,
But this is, what they said when I called them. I don't know whether or not anything else can be done for them. But they felt as though that he was dragging it on way too long. Because it's been 5 years since he started doing this. that came out, I think in September of 2017.
So to clarify, if Cohasset Imports agrees to a permanent restrictive covenant, as Rich outlined in his previous letter, for automotive diagnostics and repairs only, not involving the transfer or access of fluids. If that is in place, as well as the installation of a water quality swale, as well as testing,
Wait, as well as additional plantings.
okay, and additional plantings, and testing twice per year, and unannounced inspections up to 4 times per year. If
Okay.
all those conditions are agreed to, are we saying as a board, we support ZBA granting a change of use from a storage building to an automotive repair garage?
Well, there's also that other wrinkle that he only has 2 lifts on the site.
But that's gonna be determined by the ZBA, correct?
No. It's not gonna be, this whole thing is based on only 2 lifts on the site. And that's what he was saying. It wasn't 4 lifts.
So almost, Chris, this might be like a 2 motion. This, the motion that Lee made,
No, because he was saying, don't you remember, Mr. Anderson was saying that they were only going to have the 2 lifts on the site, and he had to have the lift, the car up in the air until it got totally fixed because of supply chain issues.
right? Well, I don't remember, but obviously I wasn't
No,
here.
you weren't there.
But I say if this is maybe a 2 motion part, what you put on the floor, then what Chris is suggesting, that if they accept these covenants,
They were the one that they were the one that proposed the covenant and the
Right.
swale and the extra planning.
so if we say this, if we say yay to this motion, I think Chris could make another motion that we would be supportive of 508.
I mean, I think that's what is up for discussion right now. I don't think anyone is 100% comfortable with it. And he has a building that's permitted as a storage garage, and he's openly using it as a auto repair garage. So when he gets the change of use to be an auto repair garage,
I don't think it's going to be a change of use to be an auto repair garage. I think I don't know.
That's the whole basis of this.
Yeah.
If
'Cause
you
I
look at
don't know.
if you look at Rich's letter, that's the whole basis of this, and
Yeah.
that's what he's going before the ZBA for.
So we need so
So, but he was saying an auto repair garage where they really weren't repairing cars. That was the funny thing. He just said that they were diagnostics and auto repair with no fluids. So it wasn't, it wasn't your typical auto repair garage.
no, it's not.
That's the strange thing. So
Right.
it's hard to say exactly what he was looking for.
But I think if we, kind of, Chris, if I'm misstating you, just stop me. If we support these changes, at least we'll have a say or in with going forward if we see a misuse. Because
We can bring it to their attention
right,
at any time.
listen, diagnostics, when you have an issue with car, you have fluids involved. I mean, we all know that. It's not just a computer testing. You're going in there for an issue. So.
Well, and that's what I was saying is, even with all of these things, that none of us are 100% comfortable. Certainly, I know Lee is not comfortable with this, and that is part of why this is such a lengthy deliberation, is because we're going to attempt to put in restrictions and protective measures, but at the core of this, it's still being reclassified as an auto repair garage. You see what he's doing when it's classified as a storage barn.
Right.
Mhm.
So I like what we've done so far, especially adding the water testing. In that if they agree upon it, they're paying for it. It takes a little finances off the water department and they'll be responsible for testing. I think that makes me feel a lot more comfortable, because if we do see an issue, then you have the DEP, there's a lot of stuff will start falling down if we find some petrochemicals or PFAS in that area.
So in John Halden's letter of April 6th, 2022, it says on August 2nd, 2017, the ZBA decision issued for the property. The applicant seeks to construct a single story storage building. The storage building was permitted under the use group of utility, miscellaneous barns, sheds, private garage. The building was constructed under this guideline. The building is currently being used as a motor vehicle repair garage. This use is not permitted and should cease immediately. Service lifts should be removed from the building. An application to the ZBA should be made for the change in use. And then Rich Henderson's letter says they have done just that. And they did that many months ago, and they're waiting to come before the ZBA.
See, but when they did that, what they were saying was one lift there and one lift in the other building. That's how their application was several months ago. And I have not seen any change in their application. This is where the whole problem is.
So, I mean, what we could do is, well, again, we run the risk of missing this particular opportunity to put these protective measures in place. If these protective measures do not get implemented, we continue the current conditions. Nothing changes. If the ZBA says, no, you are not granted a change of use for that building, then it is solely up to the enforcing authorities of the town.
Yeah, well. This is whatever, and looking, as I said, what we deal with, I think we just have to make sure we cover ourselves. That we are aware that there could be a potential, and we are letting them know, putting them on notice.
Correct.
And this
They claim that they've designed and constructed at great expense a modern and safe automotive facility. They fixed the septic. They've installed wastewater collection systems for vehicular fluids and a stormwater control system.
So
None of which have existed for the past 90 years.
But then I don't think there was a building on the site of the garage in the last 90 years. I don't know.
That's correct. You know what was there? A whole lot, but a whole lot full of rusting, leaking old vehicles that were tucked back there in the woods so no one could see them, and all the nice shiny new cars were up front. So the building being there with the conditions that are currently exist are much better than the rusting old leaking vehicles that were tucked back there in the woods for the last 50 years.
So again, just to bring this up, so we have two, so basically we can make almost two motions. You got Lee's motions, then Chris, I'm assuming that you want to make a motion similar to what you made last time.
I think our support would be contingent upon verification that all of these items are in place.
Including including Lee's motion with the testing and plants, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah, pile it on. Anything we want. Let's put a camera in there for all. I mean, let's have 24/7 monitoring. Whatever. What the greatest extent that we can protect this water source is what we should ask for.
I think the water testing is I think that's gonna be key. We can even do it 4 times a year, doesn't matter. Yeah, 4 times a year.
Oh, okay, I hate to say this. Brenda, you know what we have to go through, right? If the PFAS levels get to a certain point, you have to increase your testing. Should we put anything about in there?
What if our levels? Make them,
About PFAS levels?
yeah, I mean, what? On their site, because that's not part of our testing site.
Yeah, it's not part of our testing site, but
We could ask for 4 times a year.
yeah,
Because sometimes we get the spring, the fall peak, then it drops and it rises. We could ask for 4 times a year.
Right, so what happens if we get a test result that's not favorable?
well, we go through the motions and we have to go through the different government departments to get it resolved.
Up to the DEP.
So what happens then is that he says, well, how do you prove that my operation contributed to these levels?
Because if he's testing on site,
Yeah, no, but I mean, say
Yeah.
PFAS comes back high for that particular test. How do we prove that, our recourse would say, okay, shut the operation down.
okay,
Close the
no,
building.
wait a second. Because when you're testing up and downstream.
I was just gonna say, you test downstream or upstream of that test.
You have to test both up and downstream.
Okay, but again,
So the PFAS isn't coming from above his location, but it's coming post his location. It's obvious. Because if it wasn't there before it got to his location, it's there after it left his location. Then that would mean that you would have to have other people come in and do some more testing. Because it is an indication that that is a location that is emitting something. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
I know what you're saying. So part of that motion too, you can, either we do twice a year, 4 times a year, or we could also add it, if there's an unacceptable level, immediate testing follows upstream or downstream of location. If you make it very, descriptive, I think it'll go a long way.
Because that's what, when Jason was supposed to be testing, that's what he was supposed to be testing, upstream and downstream. And that's what we're supposed to be testing also twice a year, because we put that in a couple months ago as a requirement to have testing in that area for petroleum products.
How do you
Ourselves.
prove, how do you prove that it's the source of the contamination?
They could do more intense testing. They could do soil samples.
So who pays for all that? And what happens in the interim?
I don't know. I don't know what the government requirements or are on that. I don't know what enforcement they have, because don't forget, we don't have enforcement. We can only do what we can do to say, here, we're protecting this, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're not caught in a situation where suddenly something has blown out of proportion. We are being, doing our due diligence and keeping our sites on this area that is directly in the water supply. And then, it's just one of the tests. So if it comes back and it is not upstream, it is only downstream, then I'm sure there is a procedure through some governmental agency that will tell you exactly what to do. Is anything, they have all these hazardous waste sites and they know what they're doing on them if something comes out of it.
I mean, I think we have to understand more about what all of that means, because I don't know when he bought the property, but as we know from the history, this has been a gas station for many years. It's been a auto dealer for many years. So identifying the source of the contamination or who was at fault is a very hard thing to pin down.
Okay, no, but he has been on that property. Do you know how long he's been there, Brenda? I know he's been there at least 30 years.
Oh, my system won't go back that far. Never mind. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, well, I remember he had it when your
I have
sister
to,
was
I
in
have
high
to just
school.
step away for a second.
No problem. But the other thing too is taking a look at it.
1984, according to Rich's letter, it says beginning in 1984, 2017, the business at the site was operated by the current owner.
Okay,
He
so
bought in
that's a
84.
long time ago.
Yeah.
And they did have those 21Es by the government back then. So if there was any thought of any problem on that site, they would have had to dig it out, like they're doing for those sites across from the Catholic Church. Because it is known fact that there is contamination in downtown Cohasset. So someone, somewhere would have known about this in either the federal or state government, and they would have done massive testing back then. Because the state has had that program for a long time.
So if I could just pose the question again, though, if all of these measures
Put a
are
light
put,
on.
if all of these measures are put into place,
Mhm.
do we as a board conceptually support the change of use from a storage building to an auto repair garage? Which is ultimately what I think the ZBA is looking for from us. Whether or not we support it or not.
So without making a motion, if be supportive if the list of wants from us would be met, yes. You'd rather have some kind of enforcement versus, if you don't have, like you said, if you don't do anything, there remains, if you obviously didn't do anything in the cease and desist, he would continue on.
That's my sense, yeah.
You kind of want some control. It allows us some control of the water resources, especially when we add the testing in.
Yeah, as long as the ZBA knows that we are actively pursuing protecting our water supply, there are conditions under Concom that he has to maintain. So it's not all in our court. If we just go on, as we said, to say, okay, he's going to put this restrictive covenant on and, mention what he said in his restrictive covenant, he wants to put in this swale and the other, fine. And in order to protect our water supply, we want to have him do a testing. We don't want to say we want him to have to do testing because we see that over the last 5 years, he hasn't exactly followed through with what he was supposed to do, but at least this way, we could pick up if anything happens.
Right.
And, you know, and it is extremely important because you take a look at the potential dangers, especially to children, with our water supply, if anything gets into it. And we're not able to control it. And then,
Brenda, can the quarterly testing be added to a bill?
I don't,
It would have to be a programming thing. We don't really have a line item for something like that. In our budget, I can do separate billing through QuickBooks, which I do for a lot of things, but, and the bill would go directly, you know, whatever it is,
Yeah,
I can send it to the customer. It can be done that way. And then I could take those monies and have it, once I receive the monies, have it go back into, if we paid for it up front, go back into our chemical and lab line item.
The customer couldn't, remember whomever couldn't pay for it directly. Quest Imports couldn't pay the bill.
Oh, no, they could absolutely pay for it directly. I didn't think that was the question. No, they could.
No,
absolutely-
yeah, that wasn't the question, but, it seems like that would be easier if it's allowed.
Yeah, because that's just puts, you know, more
So,
work in here.
my wavelength, I was kind of thinking that, if we,
with their grandfather.
we invoice it, what happens? He doesn't pay. So we don't,
Well, it's a thing, yeah, well, I guess we could create something. I don't know. That would be like a Danny question. Because again, that's all accounting and how it gets coded when it gets to the treasurer's office.
okay. I think I'm satisfied with everything everybody said. We all contributed, so. Do you want to do two motions? We'll do these motion, and Chris, I think you want to make a motion.
Can we,
What's the first motion?
well, can I just start with what Lee started with and then we can edit it as we go along?
Long one, go ahead.
This is what we got so far. Lee made a motion to have Chris lay out a draft for ZBA to include discussion with Rich Henderson, what the proposed additional environmental protection measures, including the planting of additional bushes and a swale, including water quality testing. The board would also include in its permanent restrictive covenant, testing of PFAS and petroleum products twice a year. Is that still twice a year?
Yep, I would say, do you want
Wait.
more?
Which is in addition to the biannual inspection by appropriate town department, paid for by owner of 508 CJC Highway.
Yep.
Yep.
That sounds good to me.
I'll
All
second.
right. Second, all in favor?
Hi,
All right. I'm saving that before I lose it.
okay. I think I'm moving to another location.
My kids yet, they're going
Oh, I
back.
thought it was your kids, Steve.
They.
Please, grandkids.
kids.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the conversation correctly, the second motion would be.
What?
The second motion would be. The Water Commission supports the change of use. For the smaller building. Contingent upon these conditions being met and verified by the board.
Motion made by Chris. There's the changes for the use in the smaller building. Start again after that. Sorry, Chris.
The Water Commission. Would
Approved.
support, yeah, would support the change of use from a storage building to an auto repair garage. Contingent upon. Conditions being met and verified by the board. Which, from a practical standpoint, I don't know how that all sequences out, because if the ZBA is not going to hear this again, they're either going to grant change of use or not on the 15th. And none of these things would be in place by that point. So, I mean, I'm not experienced enough on the procedural matters as to how this would sequence out, but we would have to verify that all of these things are in place. I mean, and someone needs to write up that restrictive covenant. We need to read it, approve it. The water quality swale has to be installed.
Actually, for on Chris for that motion. Brendan, read that motion back one more time, because we might want to insert covenant in there.
Okay, motion made by Chris that the Water Commission would support, approve the change of use for the smaller building contingent upon conditions being met by the board. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Conditions being met and verified by the board.
There you go.
Yeah, but I don't know if we should identify it specifically as an auto repair garage.
Well, that's what, again, I mean, this
I
all
know.
goes back to John Talon's cease and desist letter.
So I
And
know what I'm trying to do. I think it's, I think it's a good idea, because if it does get approved as an auto repair garage, or if it's out of our control, we have the covenants to back us up. Right, Chris? Is that,
yeah, I mean, in the event that this is approved as a motor vehicle repair garage.
I would
we
say put in
have these
diagnostic
place.
center,
What did you say?
Oh,
Liz?
diagnostic center, because that's what they kept saying. It was a diagnostic
No,
center
no, that's
and
incorrect.
auto repair.
It's incorrect. So technically, the ZBA granted a permitted use for a utility building, which is classified as miscellaneous barns, sheds, private garage. The building was constructed under this guideline. The building is currently being used as, quote, a motor vehicle repair garage. This is not the permitted use and should cease immediately. Service lifts should be removed. An application to the ZBA should be made for change of use. So that's what Rich says they have applied for. So it is a motor vehicle repair garage that the bigger building is classified as a motor vehicle repair garage. The smaller building in question is a utility building.
Yeah.
And what Rich is proposing is the restrictive covenant would say that that building, which would then be classified as a motor vehicle repair garage, would have a restrictive covenant to be used only for automotive diagnostics and repair, in which no automotive fluids are accessed or transferred. So there's certain technical classifications of the building, and Rich is suggesting that it be restricted to diagnostic repairs, which he claims will not involve the accessing or transferring of automotive fluids. So that's just a made up term that they're suggesting.
Mhm.
yeah,
If this does get classified and permitted as a motor vehicle repair garage without any restrictions or additional protective measures, then it's a free for all and he does whatever he wants.
That's right.
And
And it
if
could be expanded in future years.
well, again, this restrictive covenant would eclipse whatever transfer of ownership.
Mhm.
So this smaller building would, in theory, only be used for, quote, automotive diagnostic repairs.
But that's basically anything.
That's the rub.
Yep. Because when you're going into a garage, you're either going in for an inspection, oil change, or you have a problem, which is diagnostic auto repair. So,
I think Chris is on the right. Yeah,
I mean, I think we're all saying the same thing.
we
We're
are,
very concerned about what has been allowed here. We have a promise from them that they're going to be doing the environmental, as you said, the swale and the bush, and the restrictive covenant. And then we just want to add to make sure to cover us, that we don't get a surprise that they're going to be doing testing. And we're also going to be doing our own testing at our site, so that we will have something to compare it with too, which is very valuable down the future in tracing.
Okay, so the first motion, which I don't know if we need to vote on that, but I'm gonna draft a letter and I'm gonna circulate it to this group for review.
Mhm.
Okay, does that require a vote?
No,
So the motion, which I'm not sure if it even needs to be now, but the motion on the table would be if Cohasset Imports agrees to putting these measures in place and we can verify it, then the Board of Water Commissioners would support the change of use. Are we in agreement on that motion? Is that what we're trying to vote on?
would be in support of what, Chris?
Change of use for the building.
I agree with that verbiage.
I mean, we're not trying to shut them down.
No,
Want to make sure that we are protecting.
protecting the assets.
That's it.
So I think we could possibly make a motion on Chris's.
Chris made a motion. If Cohasset Imports agrees to put these in place, then the board would be in support of the change of use for the building.
I like that better.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Lisa and I?
Yep.
Okay, that's 3 ayes.
Okay, got it.
Oh, that was a high.
I will do my best to draft that tonight, circulate it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm
Um,
gonna get rid of the previous motions.
Okay.
Brendan, do you have the letterhead in Word format?
I do.
Can you send that to me, please?
Yes.
So what, let's go, what, do you want to go on to the second? I have time. So, you wanna
Oh,
go-
you know what? Hold on 1 second. Let me just, I'm off tomorrow and I gotta go to a Legion meeting after this, but I'll bring my computer home. Let it head to Chris. All right, I just had to write myself a sticky note.
Brenda, what time do you need to take off?
Let's just move it along. I can do
I don't
this.
think the next things are going to be really quick.
Yeah, so
All
the
right.
next agenda item is gonna be South Main Street AR recap. Chris, do you want to lead this?
Sure. So yeah, basically, I just want to make sure you're in the loop. There was a report from emergency management that was circulated. I don't know if you guys saw the final draft or final version, but basically it was a recap of the events and basically informing the select board of what happened and what could happen. So it's not a surprise if there's some type of catastrophe or issue down the road. So has anyone seen that yet?
I haven't.
So,
All right, I'll circulate the draft I have. So, I think everyone is comfortable that the fix that was put in place is considered permanent. The only thing that would change that opinion is if there's a major problem with the culvert in that area, which Brian Joyce has some plans in the warmer weather to get inside the culvert and shore up the walls and do some inspections. Generally that's not our issue, that's DPW. But our work in water main, is a factor in the conditions that are currently existing. But moreover, there was a lot of discussion on reprioritizing water main replacements in the center of town in Elm Street because they're all 1800s vintage pipe. From My understanding thus far, there has been no discussion or plan to replace that pipe. That's not on any capital plan in the near future. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, but one thing to keep in consideration, Chris, let's say our capital plans are fluid, because Jason kind of changed our capital plans around when he was here. So there is nothing that says that we cannot reevaluate and make modifications.
Right, absolutely. But this one happens probably to be particularly more complicated because it's the center of town, and it's my understanding we always try to time things with other work or paving schedules.
I mean, that
So,
happened to us on Elm Street. That's why we were delayed 2 years replacing the pipe on Elm Street, because the paving got delayed.
so I think that's one of the
Prior
biggest
to-
takeaways, one of the biggest takeaways, and probably something we should discuss going forward or at a later meeting is if we're going to fast track the planning and engineering and funding of that replacement, which would probably be smart. So that's a topic that should be discussed and evaluated. Secondarily, just through sort of some high level discussion around the AAR table, there's something like 20 or 30 other locations around town where we have a water main under a water crossing. So under different culverts or other areas. So if we have the ability to, we should try to identify all of those locations and determine what age pipe those are, which would just be kind of a good practice to evaluate the potential of something like this ever happening again. And then, of course, as Brian always stresses, we have a fair amount of pipe out there that's 1800s vintage. So as a board, we, as it relates to our capital plan, that needs to be part of our discussions.
Okay, we've been discussing that also, but talking about cost, do we have any figures about what the cost was for this project?
No, I checked, couldn't reach Brian today. IREA's bill I'll probably have next week. I've sent an email to them, but D'Alessandro, that's gonna be the big one.
Because I was talking to Michelle Leary, I saw her outside the polls the other day, and she did mention to me that if we could get something to her before they go to press, that we could add a line to that warrant article for retained earnings that we have for Beechwood and put a line in for this.
The warrant's going to print Monday.
Yeah, but if we can get it there before Monday, before they send it out,
I'm off. tomorrow.
say, what?
I'm off tomorrow.
Okay.
It's
Do we,
Veterans Day.
can we,
Otherwise, it will be an amendment on town meeting floor, which is nothing unusual.
But the way that that was written for the warrant article from the retained earnings, well, I guess they could change it, but we rewrote it so that those monies, that 100,000 is going to go from retained earnings into the capital budget line item for Beechwood Street.
Yeah, but I'm saying we could say 2 items under that warrant article. It could be A, Beechwood Street with this, and
Yep.
B, Main Street, getting retained earnings to be put into our system maintenance line item for this current year.
The only thing I will say about that is I know in the past when we've tried to pad our fiscal year budget, it's always frowned upon.
All right, now I'm just trying to think of some way that we could.
I mean,
pay
I would
people.
love to do that. I mean, yeah, let's throw 200,000 into it.
right,
Be a happy camper and not be worried about it.
No, but yeah.
I
this
know
is an
in the
unusual
past when we tried to do it, we had issues.
well, how
Yeah.
else are we gonna pay for it?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, I don't know.
This is
The other option we have is to just let it ride until the next town meeting and then pad our budget to say for this operation. And since
Yeah.
we've had so many breaks, that is unusual for the year, we need
mean,
to increase our system maintenance budget by blankety blank to get us through the end of the year.
I mean, yeah, if you want, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to, I know in the past when we tried to do it with Don, he wasn't hip on that at all. But I know when we changed it from it being taken out of our retained earnings, originally we said it was gonna go into our system maintenance budget. But then when we realized Beechwood Street was being held off until next year and we could wait on that, that way it could go directly into the capital.
We
Mhm.
have control of.
But again, I mean, it's worth a shot, I guess. It's just, all of this is being done at the last second now, unfortunately, and the finance director's not, no,
Actually, it's gonna be tough because all the town hall is off tomorrow, right? Because it's Veterans Day.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Urban.
So anyhow, so we probably will be putting, if we plan to do this at all, depending on how much it comes in and what our budget looks like. We have the option, Michelle told us, of doing an amendment on town meeting floor for that warrant article and adding to it.
Yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, I mean, that's our best bet. This is gonna be $130,000, I would guess.
I
It's gonna
don't
be
know,
huge. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be $130,000.
but this is just something to look at. And one other thing, while I was at the emergency management meeting, I was talking to police chief. And he was talking about the heavy construction equipment going down Elm Street to the site of new condominiums where the hotel was in the harbor. And they are not supposed to be taking that route. They're supposed to be coming down Beechwood over Main and then down Summer. And he says that he notices the police station shakes a lot when they go by. Because they're very heavy machines. And so we have this question of what could possibly be happening with our pipe that we keep discussing is the 1880, that little section between Main Street and Stevens Lane. And also, there is the talk about the garage next door to Red Line coming down and 10 condos going in there. So this is something else just to keep in the back of your mind, that we might be having heavy construction equipment down there on Main Street. So this is, I don't know how the town will handle that. Because if they're concerned about the culverts.
Future construction of new water services would be responsible for replacing X amount of feet of mains. Too, right?
Yeah, but we're replacing X amount of feet of main, but I'm just saying where this construction is going to be, it's right where we had that problem. So that's just something that, we have to think about as we're getting our priority list going.
Brenda, I don't know if I've seen this or just conceptually someone mentioned it, but do we have a listing or a database of water main dates, vintage
Yes.
dates?
We have a map, I know that.
I have it somewhere in my fold. I know between Lee and I, we have,
Oh, you know what? I think I do have it somewhere, Chris.
I think I have it too. It's done by age and street.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it. Wasn't it Excel?
Yes.
Okay, if someone wouldn't mind resending that to me.
I'll-
So, Steve, I think that's the basis of the AAR, and everything is pretty calm now. The work is completed, and probably not the last time we'll talk about it, but we just wanted to fill you in on what that AAR was about.
Thank you to all the staff that was out there all night too. They worked hard, All right, so we won't the next agenda item is financials. Really not much there to.
There isn't anything because unfortunately Jen's not ready yet until November 15th.
Yep.
As she said from her email.
Yeah, I thought that was good, Lee. At least you clearly explained our perspective on indirect cost and put it on her radar, even though she pushed back on it. It's out there. Definitely needs to be discussed. And
Yeah, well,
otherwise,
from my perspective, what we have to do is get this indirect cost issue buttoned up before the town decides to take any of the money out of our budget.
right.
Because once they do that, it becomes the horror show that we've had from last year that we haven't gotten any information about yet. So hopefully we'll be seeing that.
All right. Anything else to report, Brenda? Any issues on?
I have, no, I don't have anything that, but I do have an abatement request from me. David Burgers from 15, it's not for me. David Burgers from 15 Sheldon Road has been paying probably a year and a half for a second meter for his irrigation system, which he hasn't turned on, and his house is being renovated and blah, 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 blah. So I removed the second. It's an accounting issue. Basically, what happened was the water bills went out, and there were two places where I'm supposed to remove the coating. I only removed it in one space. So I'm requesting that he get abated $61 off of his $241 bill because he hadn't any water usage because he's not living in the house. But I've since fixed the coating, but I'm asking that the board approve an abatement for $61 because he shouldn't have been charged for that second meter. Because we removed it 6 months ago.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the abatement of $61 and what was it, James?
$61.
Yeah, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I think that is it, kids.
Well, one more thing, Chris.
Thank you, Brenda. I would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the Water Commission meeting of October 18th and November 1st. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right, meeting adjourned.
First, thank you for serving the country. Happy Veterans Day to you.
Thank you, sir. It's my honor.
My cousins out there, so. All right, so we'll see everybody next Tuesday.
Sounds good.
Good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, have a
Thanks, guys.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day, Alpina. Take care.
Bye.